I'm not scared of pressure. I'm not scared of something different and something new.
Kevin started having to go on a Friday all the way across London to go through his team with the president.
Kevin can make a very good impact as a player if he is free of the additional burden of managerial duties.
They wanted me just to mill around the training ground, not to take the keepers, that Roberto would be coming in to take the keepers because they needed him on the Saturday to sit on the bench and for the president to phone him to make the substitutions.
I know that he was on the bench a few times and he did have his phone. And the young lad, the centre forward, Scott Cashkit, remember Scott? I think it was a case was going to put him on and told not to put him on.
Couldn't carry on. Like, it's just like eating you from the inside. Like every day going to training and thinking, what's going to happen today?
Hello everyone and welcome to episode 8 of The Circus Upstairs.
I'm James Masters, journalist and still very happy Leyton Orient fan.
I'm Matt Simpson, author of the book Leyton Orient Greats. Currently 783,620th ranked book on Amazon, which, if you remember last season, is about 100,000 places lower than when this podcast started. What the fuck?
It's the only thing to do with Orient that's gone down over the last season.
I'm almost quite proud of that. What a legacy. I mean, how can it go down 100,000 places just by doing a podcast?
Everyone who's been listening has been giving it the thumbs down, pushing it further and further into obscurity.
Let's move on. Could you remind us where we're up to in this crazy story that we're telling?
Of course, Matt. Well, we had owner Francesco Becchetti given a 6-game ban and a 40k fine for kicking assistant manager Andy Hessenthaler up the arse after the win over Portsmouth. Orient's form continued to be, well, dismal, and finally Ian Hendon was sacked, becoming the 5th manager to go under the Becchetti reign.
Which leaves us with a vacancy. Who did Becchetti appoint as manager number 6 in his reign?
He didn't just appoint a manager. Oh no, it was a player manager. Kevin Nolan from West Ham United. Wow.
So there's a bit of backstory to this. He was training with Leyton Orient as a way of keeping fit after leaving West Ham at the end of the previous season. Is that right?
Yep, that is right. Nolan had left West Ham. He'd been training with Orient. There'd been lots of rumours about was he going to sign for the O's as a player. Nothing had come to fruition. And then once Hendon left, we were hit with this news that he'd been appointed on a 2.5-year deal, I think it was. I actually went to meet Kevin shortly after he was appointed. I was working for the Times. But I'll tell you what he said to me. He said the following: "It's such an unbelievable club to start your managerial career at. I had a number of offers from clubs abroad, but things that weren't really concrete or going on. This just gave me that bit of a buzz, and I fancied a bit of it. I'm just glad I've made the step in this direction. You only have to look around. It's such a great club. I've had over 100 missed calls and 400 text messages. Everyone's heard of Leyton Orient."
What?
Everyone's heard of Leyton Orient for the reasons that you don't want to be talking about, though, Kevin. At this point, I would suggest.
No, I was more worried about the 100 missed calls. He should pay more attention to his phone.
The other thing he told me, Matt, but this is what he said to me at the end. He said, "My boy speaks East End Cockney and he's just turned 6. He's walking into school with his sister with their chests puffed out because their dad is the manager of Leyton Orient. I knew it was a big club when I first came down to London, but I didn't realise how well supported they were."
Hang on. His 6-year-old son speaks East End Cockney.
That's what the quote says, yeah.
So there's this 6-year-old Scouse kid going around school, eating jelly deals, listening to Chas and Dave and claiming he knows the Cray twins.
Yeah, absolutely. But he's got his chest puffed out because his dad's the manager of Leyton Orient.
So while all of his mates are on their Nintendo Switches, he's round the old Joanna banging out Knees Up Mother Brown.
I don't think Kevin was being literal, Matt, when he said that his kids speak in Cockney, that's all. What I will say from my conversation from Kevin, I remember him being very excited. I think he did know to a degree what he was walking into, but I genuinely think he was excited. He wanted to get into management. This was the way it was going to go for him. And you could see he was enthusiastic. You could see he knew what Orient was about. I think he just wanted to get going.
Let's listen in to Lee Harrison, who avid listeners will remember was the goalkeeping coach that season, on his take on the Kevin Nolan appointment.
Kevin had just come in to get fit, to stay fit because he lived locally. So I don't think, Kevin never came in there with the feeling that he was going to be the manager of the football club. He literally just came in to keep fit and tick over. But I think once the Italians saw him in there, they thought they had an ex-Premier League player, and I think their brains started ticking as to. So I think they came up with the player-manager job as a guise to get Kevin to play more than Kevin to be the manager, if I'm being honest.
The point that Harrison makes there is that he felt that they wanted to get him in the team, and the only way they're going to get him in the team or to sign for them was to give him the manager's job.
Let's listen in to what Kevin Nolan said at his first press conference as Leyton Orient manager.
I'm not scared of pressure. I'm not scared of something different and something new. But I'm really looking forward to having the power, where you can influence a lot what's going on.
Awkward. Did he not have any sense of what had been going on at the club?
He's the 6th manager in 16 months, I think it is. So when you're going into a club like that, you would have thought you're going to have some sense of, okay, there's going to be some shenanigans here. But I also think that Kevin, I don't think you become as good a player and a successful player without being single-minded and driven. And perhaps he thought he could go in there, and because of the career he'd have the respect of the players and be able to carry out his project, his ideas. And so perhaps at that point he felt confident enough to lay his cards on the table and say, yeah, okay, fine, I'm not scared, I'm not going to take any crap. It's just how we're going to do it.
So, fair enough. Did Kevin Nolan win his first game as Leyton Orient player manager?
Well, Matt, not only did he win his first game, he won his first 2 games. But after those 2, really good results, Orient returned to Brisbane Road and normal services resumed with a 3-1 home defeat by Cambridge United.
Which meant that by the end of January, Orient were now in 9th place with 43 points from 29 games. Still there or thereabouts in the playoffs. So I think we're all still feeling positive that we had a chance of making it. And I think fans were behind Kevin. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think so. I think people were excited that he was playing for Orient. And also things have been so bad before that at least there was some wins at the start. There was some encouragement. We had the 2 wins that I spoke of against Wickham and Newport. And after Cambridge, they went to Portsmouth and won 1-0 with a really good goal by this guy called Joby McAnuff. Hadn't been in the team. Probably should have been. One to watch out for, Joby McAnuff. Looks like he could have been a good player. And even though they lost to Northampton heavily in the next game, there were 2 more wins in February away at Notts County and at home to Crawley. So inconsistent, but there were still results coming. I think after having such a poor run under Ian Hendon, people were just relieved to see Orient winning a few games again.
Something else also happened in February, the return of someone that listeners will remember from season 1. So Fabio Liverani's translator, handsomest man in football, Rob Gagliardi, left at the end of the previous season, but in the middle of Feb, returned not as a translator, but as, inexplicably, head of recruitment. What do you think about that?
Gagliardi comes in the February. Well, January window's already gone. So I just felt like the timing was weird. It was weird that he had been the translator who was now suddenly involved in recruitment, in fact, in charge of recruitment. I think people just looked at that move and thought, what is going on here? Another bewildering decision.
So those wins in February you talked about meant that by the end of the month, Orient were actually 7th, back in the playoff positions with 52 points from their 33 games. So we're back in the playoff positions as we went into March. How did we get on in March?
Not great, Matt. We won 2, drew 1 and lost 3, slipping to 8th with 59 points from our 39 games.
But that slight drop-off in form meant that dreaded word interference began to rear its head again. Let's have a listen to George Sessions, one of the journalists covering the club during that period, on his take on that.
I'm certain at this stage Becchetti was really heavily trying to actually pick the team again. And I remember 100% he was saying to Kevin, to play these players and go in this formation. And I'm fairly certain that Kevin would always have to go to Becchetti's house, I think, or somewhere in London, basically, to meet him on a Friday and tell him. And Kevin would tell Becchetti what the team was, and then Becchetti would turn around and say, "Oh no, you should play this player and this player." And Kevin, being the person he is, would always absolutely ignore it.
And let's also have a listen to Lee Harrison again for his take on that.
Was all the same stuff going on behind the scenes when Kevin was in the role?
They left Kevin for a bit. All that started out when Kevin came in and started well as well. And results picked up and we sort of got back in the playoffs, I think, just about. But then Kevin started having to go on a Friday all the way across London to go through his team with the president. And then Kevin started getting told, well, this, that and the other. Lloyd James isn't to play, or Nigel Hessenthaler has to play. So different things were happening there because there was a game against Morecambe. We won 1-0 with a penalty, I think. But what happened was a man got sent off. So we played Nigel, and I'm pretty sure Kevin took Nigel Hessenthaler off at half-time and put Lloyd James on. And Kevin's reasoning was that all of a sudden we were playing 11v10 and we'd have more of the ball. So it didn't become a game that we needed a 6-foot midfielder in there. We actually needed someone who could play and pass. But the Italians weren't having that. They didn't think Lloyd James should be anywhere near the pitch. So that was the first rumblings of a proper falling out.
Yeah, just a very strange thing. But also, if you're Kevin Nolan, you've been playing in the Premier League, you've been having a successful career, and now you're being told you have to go across London with your homework to see the teacher and to make sure it gets marked properly. It must have been a little humiliating having to explain yourself every week.
So, going into April, what happened next on the pitch?
On the pitch, we had a 1-1 draw away at York. Lloyd James scored the goal, would you believe? So it's lucky he was on the pitch.
It was. Can I just say, I don't know if this was your memory, but every time Kevin Nolan played, he was shit.
I don't remember Nolan doing anything on the pitch that got me excited or made me think that he was going to live up to the hype.
How many goals did he used to score for Newcastle? He didn't score a single goal for us. I'm sympathetic because he was trying to be manager at the time, but he was terrible on the pitch. He did nothing for us. And
the player manager thing doesn't work. It felt like he was crowbarred to crowbar him into the team. I think he was probably looking at the management side a lot more than the playing side. And you can't do everything, Matt. You can't do everything.
We spoke to Howard Gould, who was part of the backroom staff at the time. He was our community liaison officer, on his take on Kevin Nolan as a player.
When he was playing, they kept trying to mould a team around him, and it wasn't working. I think we were worse when he was playing, if I remember. It suddenly got worse. He couldn't hit the back of the net, to save his life. Missed a couple of open goals, if I remember. And that done him in, really.
So after the 1-1 draw with York City, what was the next game, James?
The next game was London Derby away at Barnet. I grew up in Barnet. I went to school in Barnet. I was constantly teased throughout school by Barnet supporters. So I always look forward to this one as a chance to get one over those people. So yes, we went and got beat 3-0 and it was humiliating.
Hang on, you were teased by Barnet supporters because you supported Leyton Orient?
Yeah, can you believe that?
And who's laughing now? Anyway, let's get Lee Harrison's take on that 3-0 defeat to Barnet.
I remember the Barnet game, Kevin wanted Lloyd James playing. And I think Kevin was told sort of before the game, Lloyd James doesn't play. And Kevin went, no, I'm playing him. And I think that was where they then decided that they didn't want Kevin there because he was going to be doing what he wanted to do and not what they wanted to do.
So a few days later, it was announced that Kevin Nolan was being removed as manager, but was to continue as a player. So He'd won 7 out of his 15 games. We were 2 points off of the playoffs, but admittedly had only got 1 point from the last 4 games. We spoke to club captain for that season, Matt Baldry, on his take on that decision.
That was another mental decision. It's just, I think, like, in the hindsight, I think for me it's impossible to be a player manager. I think you could see, like, he had so much going on, I think, as a manager. And I think like you say, he did a good job. I think we got some very good results, especially at the start. And then we got maybe too many draws, if I remember. But I thought he did well. And maybe I think he affected it more in his playing capacities, I feel. Because compared to, for example, when he was training with us, before he was manager, he's like, footballing-wise, he was just so good. And then when he got manager, I feel like he was taking away a bit from, like, his playing. He had a lot to think about, and he was on the pitch, like, trying to care about all the other things that you care when you're a manager. And I think it's quite a tough thing to do. And I think maybe if they should have maybe said to him, like, maybe the other way around would have made sense. Like, maybe stop playing, focus on managing. But once you sack him as a manager, you can't ask him to carry on as a player. Like, it doesn't make no sense. Like, how will you have just carry on and just play as a manager? It's just ridiculous. So yeah, I just feel sorry for him. And then he was just there, like, coming to training. There was no need for it, really.
And then we asked Andy Hessenthaler if it was a shock when he heard that Kevin Nolan had been removed as manager.
Massive. Yeah, massive. But it was, but we all know why again. You know, it was the same scenario, really. It was the same. You know, when I said to you earlier on about I was hoping things would change, it didn't. And, you know, it was a shock because he was finding his feet, because it takes time. He's finding his feet. And it was going along nicely, and that just shows you again some really poor decisions from the top.
Thirdly, we spoke to Lee Harrison for his perspective on Nolan being removed as manager.
Kevin used to come in on the Sunday with the players. He wanted to have a recovery day, then it would be Monday off, then 4 days training into the game. So me and Hess wouldn't come in on the Sunday. We'd come in and take the other players who hadn't played on the Monday. So Monday came, Kevin obviously had done the Sunday. Monday came after the Barnet game, and me and Hess took the group. But Vito came out and he went, Hess, you need to speak to the president now on the phone. So Hess went and spoke to him, then came back out to me and said, they want me to take over and they're just going to tell Kevin to be a player. And I went, they told the gaffer this. And he went, no. And I went, listen, do yourself a favour, Hess, and you better phone Kev. I said, because it's not going to look good if he turns up tomorrow and you're there you're there as manager. So he did. He phoned him and we spoke to Kevin.
Do you remember how you felt when you heard that Nolan was being removed as manager, but to carry on as a player?
I thought it was one of those decisions that just gave another example of the lack of knowledge, insight of any kind of leadership. You're going to take Kevin Nolan's managerial job away from him, and then you're going to tell him that he's now just a player and that he's got to work under somebody else who was his assistant manager just the day before. And you're going to expect Kevin Nolan to perform at a high enough level to succeed with Leyton Orient. It's just absolutely ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. I think Matt Baldry said it. And it completely undermines Kevin. Everyone in the squad must be thinking, what the hell is going on? Andy Hessenthaler is probably thinking, what the hell's going on? Nobody knows what's going on.
I just felt it was a ludicrous decision at the time. I was really angry about it.
It just smacked of ineptitude once again.
So CEO Alessandro Angeleri and Chief Operating Officer Vito Michelli decided to call a meeting with all of the players and backroom staff to explain this crazy decision to them. And one of the people there was kitman Ada Martin, who's been at the club for many, many years, part of the fabric of Leyton Orient. And here's what Lee Harrison had to say about that meeting and Ada's reaction.
Alessandro tried to do a meeting in front of the players, and me and Kev Nolan were sat at the back, To which Ada went off on one. He was swearing at the Italians. You've ruined the football club. You've done this. You've done that. Fair play to him. He emptied it all out onto him. And he went up so much in my estimations, obviously, because some of the things after I left, people were just like, oh, this is just, everyone was sort of saying, no, this is just a car crash now. What's going on?
How did they react when Ada went off on one?
They were cowards, really, these two, the Italians. They just did whatever the president wanted them to do. So they took it and then just go off and disappear.
And obviously Matt Baldry was there at the meeting too, so we asked him for what he remembered about that day.
Ada is proper calm and very like collected, but he just lost his shit. Like he was just not happy, and like you're thinking like, Ada, you've been there so long, like you don't want to do it to say anything silly or something. But I think it was just like came from the heart.
I mean, that just shows how ridiculous the situation had got, didn't it?
I also don't really understand or even begin to fathom what Angeleri or Becchetti would possibly have said in those circumstances that would have quelled the squad, because this event is just, it's unprecedented, really, and also it just leaves them in such a state of disarray, further disarray. I'm struggling for words, Matt, because it's so preposterous.
Curiously, however, the removal of Kevin Nolan as manager wasn't the maddest decision that happened that week at the club, because the day after, Lee Harrison was told that he was no longer required because, wait for it, former translator and current head of recruitment, Roberto Gagliardi, was to take up another position as first-team goalkeeping coach. Here's what Lee had to say about that.
They pulled me in the next morning and said, basically, they wanted me just to mill around the training ground, not to take the keepers. That Roberto would be coming in to take the keepers because they needed him on the Saturday to sit on the bench and for the president to phone him to make the substitutions. And I was in awe, and my jaw dropped, and I was like, so you're going to pay me just to come in? Roberto's going to take the keepers all week, and let me get this right, on a Saturday he'll take them, but the president's going to sit in his flat in Mayfair and make the subs. Yeah, so he's going to phone Roberto and make the subs. Okay, all right. I said, well, in my contract it says first-team goalkeeper coach. I said, unless you're going to sack me now and pay my contract off, I'll be out taking the keepers training and I'll be there Saturday in the dugout. Over to you, what you want to do. And I think they went into panic then, because I think Vito didn't expect me to sort of put it back in his court, and got really nervous when I decided I was going back out to take the training. They were trying to usher me back into the building. And I said, look, no worries, I'll go home. I said, I expect a letter by tomorrow morning telling me one way or the other, because I'm not being party to that. I can't do that. My job's here to take them. I'm not going to come in here and watch that happen. And by midnight that night, I got the letter through saying, fine, I'd been fired. And that they'd pay the next 6 months of my contract. So, yeah, that was it.
That is mental.
It's just even more crazy, absolutely crazy, that someone would be on the bench just so the president could phone them to make the substitutions.
Roberto Gagliardi has had a lot of different jobs so far. He really is the jack of all trades.
He's a busy man.
I thought you were going to say master of none there.
Still terrified of getting sued.
So, fans were obviously confused at best, furious at worst at this latest turn of events. So in an unusual move, because Francesco Becchetti rarely did interviews, we haven't heard much from him directly all the way through this podcast, but he decided to release his own statement a couple of days later explaining what was going on. It's probably worth you describing the scenario before we listen in to the statement.
This is one of the most bizarre football videos I've watched. Becchetti is in a suit with a black tie, white shirt. The background is very, very dark, apart from some sort of light arrangement at the back there. And I think all the lights are out at home, bar this one light. I'm not really sure what's going on, but his demeanour suggests that this is not going to be something Orient fans are going to enjoy.
Like, why is he dressed like he's going to a funeral?
Well, that's a very good point, Matt. Maybe that's because he's presiding over the death of Leyton Orient at this point. I will say, for all the criticism of Mr. Becchetti, much of it justified, his shirt is beautifully pressed.
I will give him that is probably a very expensive, tailored Italian shirt.
It looks magnificent.
I feel like he's stroking a cat just out of sight of the camera in a very Bond villain-esque way. Right, let's have a listen to what he said.
When I bought Leyton Orient 2 years ago, the day of the press conference, I said that my aim was to bring Leyton Orient up, and that the way would have been difficult, but that there would not have been limits to me to achieve it. That's why I have invested and will invest enough to achieve our purpose.
He actually didn't say that in the press conference. He didn't say it would be difficult. I'm also mildly terrified of his voice. It feels like the sort of voice a hitman in a Hollywood movie would use to calmly and methodically explain how he was going to kill you. Anyway, let's keep listening.
The beginning was difficult for the Leyton Orient fans and for me. I am passionate and positive person that never gives up. And I am happy being at this stage to the playoff.
He said he was happy being near the playoffs.
He couldn't have been that happy because he's just fired the manager.
He doesn't look happy. That's what I would say.
He doesn't dress happy either.
No. Let's keep listening.
There are 5 games left. Everything to play for. And our only focus at this point is to do all we can to win those last few games and find the way to Wembley. Our recent decision regarding Kevin Nolan's status as player manager was taken because we believe that Kevin can make a very good impact as a player if he is free of the additional burden of managerial duties. Kevin is still learning as a manager, but his experience as a player is second to none. I want Kevin's focus on the pitch with the team at the moment.
But for me, that encapsulates everything that's so wrong about the way he's approached the club, because he may have wanted that, but it was so clearly not what Kevin Nolan wanted. And as you said earlier, the idea that you could remove him as manager and then expect him to carry on as a player with all of the passion, enthusiasm and skill and expertise that Becchetti wanted is absolutely bonkers, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And also, Nolan wasn't tearing it up on the pitch. He might have thought he'd done a good job as a manager. I think a lot of people thought he was doing a decent job. But once you reach a situation where you're taken away from the job that you've coveted, that you really want, that you've thrown your life into, and told, no, you're just a player now. Nah, you're out. I'm sorry, I don't care who it is. You're out mentally. Your head's not in the right place.
It's like the board of McDonald's saying to their CEO, we want our annual profits to be even better. And we remember that when you were 16, you were really good at flipping burgers. So we're going to remove you as CEO and put you back in the kitchen. And then the CEO going, yeah, good idea. I'm definitely going to be very motivated by that. And probably the quality of the cooking will go up slightly in one of the Upper East Side branches. I've taken this analogy too far. A slightly less mad decision would have been to suggest to Kevin that he stopped picking himself and concentrated on managing.
Yeah, that sounds like a really smart decision there. Someone who's read business book maybe would say that.
Let's listen to the last bit of the video.
The Orient fans have been fantastic during a test season, following us home and away with their passionate support. League 2 is a tough division, and there are a lot of teams fighting for the same promotion goal. Nevertheless, the attendances have been impressive throughout, and for that I can not express enough my gratitude. We have a massive derby match on Saturday and look forward to a strong finish to the season. For the first time in 2 years, I ask you to stay close to the guys and to make them feel your huge support. Forza Orient.
How fucking dare he patronise us like that and then ask us for additional support?
Also referring to a game against Dagenham as a massive London derby. I'm sorry, I'm not having that. It's still Dagenham, isn't it?
Fair point. I'm angry again listening to this.
But I also think the soliloquy, whatever you want to call it, speaks to his state of mind at the time, where he still thinks he's doing the right thing. He still thinks that they're on the right track, that I don't think they see that it's all unravelling and that actually it's going to be blown apart far sooner than he thinks.
So manager number 6 of Becchetti's reign has gone. The decision was that Andy Hessenthaler was going to take over as caretaker for those last 5 games until the end of the season. We're going to hear from Hess himself, but first a bit of insight from Lee Harrison on what happened.
He was quite reluctant to take the job, if I remember.
Yeah, no, he was. He didn't want to do it. He just really didn't want to do it. I remember the day I left and got the letter through, Hess came and see me and he went, "How did you get that done?" I think Hess would have been quite happy then for them to come and do that to him. Hess just didn't really want to leave on bad terms with them. So he just thought, I'll give it a go doing it.
So we were really curious, given everything that had gone on, why Hess would take on the caretaker role. So we asked him exactly that.
Yeah, I mean, an opportunity, but, like I say, any football person, can you get it right, But obviously the back of my mind was the worry of the way things were being run off the pitch, and the way the chairman and the other guys were interfering. It was going to be difficult, but like I say, any football person say if you get it right, fantastic. What a club, what club to get it right for, and I wanted to do that. But yeah, no, it was a challenge. Like you think you can get it right in terms of can you get it right with the chairman? And I wouldn't have done anything different than Ian and Kev, to be fair. But you can handle the chairman in some way, shape, or form? And could you change him? But everybody knows that was never going to happen.
And lastly, here's our friend and journalist Dave Victor on the Hessenthaler appointment.
Andy Hessenthaler, I was surprised that he took the job the way that he did, because I can remember interviewing after the Yeovil game, and he made it very clear that he didn't really care if he had the job or not, and I think that was true. And he made it absolutely clear right from the get-go that Andy Hessenthaler picked the team. And I think that if you look at any of those managers, the one that definitely picked it's two that I think definitely picked the teams were Russell Slade and Andy Hessenthaler.
So, under caretaker manager Andy Hessenthaler, Orient had to prepare for what I'm going to call a massive London derby. Do you have a problem with that?
I'm sorry, but Orient against Dagenham is not massive.
Were you teased by Dagenham fans as well?
I can't get excited about playing Dagenham, sorry.
Let me rephrase. Andy Hessenthaler had to prepare the team for a game against Dagenham and Redbridge. And as part of that preparations, if you remember, he no longer has the luxury of experienced goalkeeping coach Lee Harrison to take the goalkeepers, but Rob Gagliardi, former translator and still head of recruitment, while also new goalkeeping coach. We asked Hess whether he thought Roberto Gagliardi was equipped to be the first team goalkeeping coach.
Not really. Not in my eyes, no. He wasn't a goalkeeping coach, no. It was just a case of him working in the club for me. So no, he wasn't. Not in my eyes, he wasn't. I've been in the game a long time, and he wasn't a specialist goalkeeping coach, no.
And lastly, a little anecdote from Howard Gould.
He was doing a session, and I remember looking out the window, and we were doing this session, and he was coaching. I'm going to say it because it is true, and I'm sure they'll back me up. He was coaching punching. You weren't allowed to catch. You had to punch it. And you just couldn't believe what was happening. But they had to do it because this guy was the coach. And if they didn't do it, whatever, it'd get back to Becchetti. But this is the level we were at. It was farcical.
I feel like our crack legal team are going to ask us to say right now, this was merely their opinion. And Roberto may well have been a fully excellent, brilliant, qualified goalkeeping coach. So as the team prepared for their massive London derby versus Dagenham and Redbridge, obviously thanks to Francesco Becchetti's masterstroke, Andy Hessenthaler would of course have the luxury of picking, unencumbered by management, Kevin Nolan for the team.
Well, that was the idea, wasn't it? Nolan was going to have the weight taken off his shoulders and be able to perform magic at the heart of the Orient midfield. But guess what, Matt? Got injured. Didn't play a single minute of the rest of the season after being removed as manager.
How coincidental that he was injured.
Yes, very, very.
Right. Did Leyton Orient win a massive London derby against Dagenham and Redbridge?
They did, but they did it in typical Orient fashion.
Massive.
2-0 up at half-time. So they let in 2 goals in 2 minutes. So Dagenham back in 2-2 in the massive London derby. But Orient win it, 65th minute goal from Armand Nandale, giving the O's all 3 points.
So after that massive victory versus Dagenham and Redbridge, what happened next, James?
Well, normal service resumed. Orient lose the next couple of games. A 3-1 home defeat by Plymouth and a 1-0 defeat away at AFC Wimbledon.
That's right, which made us wonder whether the interference in the team was still happening under Hessenthaler. So we asked him exactly that.
Yeah, pretty much. Like I say, it never changed, you know. But when you're in football, you want to stay in football, and each day you come in and say, could things be better? Could it be a training ground with just your staff and your players, and being able to get on with how you see you want to do things? And there was occasions that you were there on your own, but it wasn't very often. And certainly the days that you were there on your own, you could feel the atmosphere was great, you know, with the boys, and it was just that pressure of seeing the Italian fellas turning up, and you know, they weren't bad guys, they were good guys, you know, but obviously they worked for the chairman, you know, at the end of the day, so they did what the chairman was telling them to do.
Quite sad, isn't it? He seems quite sad in that quote.
But he said, I think one of the quotes he said there, he wants to be in football, and I think that's the overriding sense throughout the whole story for Hess. He just wants to be involved in football.
One other thing we should pick up on, going back to the quote from Lee Harrison a bit earlier in the podcast, he said that one of the reasons he believed Roberto Gagliardi had become the goalkeeping coach was that he was also going to sit on the bench during matches and take instructions from Becchetti himself. So we asked Andy Hessenthaler about that.
Yeah, I think again, I know that he was on the bench a few times, and the phone was, he did have his phone, and again, he was under orders, wasn't he? You know, so that's what he had to do.
Did he ever ask you to do something during a game?
Yeah, we had a problem. I can't remember what game it was, and it was the young lad, the centre forward, Scott Cashkit. Remember Scott? I think it was a case was going to put him on and told not to put him on.
And just to build on that, Scott Cashkit himself did an interview shortly after leaving the club and said this: "I wish I knew to this day what the powers that be at Orient had against me. One game last season under former boss Andy Hessenthaler, I was stripped and ready to come on, and some Italian ran down and told Hess, anyone can come on except for Cashkit."
For Scott, that's obviously, that's just a horrible thing to happen to any player. But also points to the circus upstairs, if you like, because the decisions in the game should be taken by the manager, by the coaching staff. You shouldn't have someone running down the touchline with a phone and telling you what you can and can't do. And I think this is why Hess was reluctant to take the job in the first place. But also, as a player, you must just think, what is going on? What am I doing here?
So sadly, as a consequence of losing the last 2 games, Orient slipped to 14th place in the league with 63 points from 44 games, but now mathematically unable to make the playoffs. So Becchetti's big gamble did not pay off. And we did actually end up winning the last 2 games. So we finished 8th, 6 points off the playoffs with 69 points. What a shit show of a season, James.
Yeah. Frustrating because after 5 games and 15 points and one of the best goals we've ever seen at Brisbane Road, we were naive to think that actually, do you know what, this is good, this is working, and it just seemed to go from good to average to bad to mediocre to average to mediocre to just get it over with.
So let's go back to Matt Baldry, who was out of contract at the end of that season and unsurprisingly did not choose to stay at the club. Here's what he said about why he left.
I think at that point I don't really want to be part of all this, so whatever you're offering me, like, it's not worth it. Like, I've had enough really of all this. It's been 2 years where it's just been like a shambles. And as much as I love the club, and I still love the club now, but couldn't carry on. Like, it's just like eating you from the inside. Like, every day going to training and thinking, what's going to happen today? You don't know.
That's pretty serious, is eating you from the inside.
And I think for Matt, it's even worse because he was there when we were so close to greatness, I suppose.
One final thing before we end this season. I feel so every single episode ends so sadly. So I'm going to lighten the mood now and go back to our friend Philip Othen, who was the stadium announcer at the time. And apparently, after the season finished, a tradition is that there's a staff versus players football match. And he played in that, as did Francesco Becchetti himself. And here's what Philip had to say about that.
They had a staff versus players game in closed season, and I played in goal for the second half. And Becchetti actually played himself. He ran around quite quickly, and he, at one point, I think, accidentally nutmegged Paul McCullum, and then just let out this massive screech of laughter and sort of chased after McCullum. And we were all sitting in the dugout going, he's a strange man.
Was he any good at football?
No.
I love the idea of him just screeching and tearing around the pitch like a lunatic.
I wish there was footage.
I can't imagine he moved that quickly. He was carrying quite a bit of timber. So that, sadly, brings us to the end of season 2 of the Circus Upstairs. James, what is going to happen in season 3?
Well, if you thought season 2 was depressing, wait for season 3.
Well, that's John. No one's going to listen now.
Well, there were some good moments.
Well, some fun stuff happens. Handsome translator come head of recruitment come goalkeeping coach Rob Gagliardi goes on a signing spree in previously undiscovered parts of Europe. One of the many managers in that season blames Orient's poor form on the relationship between one of the local journalists and her boyfriend, and a Plymouth ballboy and grown man claims he was brought to the brink of death, having been lightly tapped by a ball thrown by Orient's Liam Kelly. So that's all jolly. But then again, none of the players get paid and the club nearly goes out of existence. Lots to talk about anyway. James, thank you. Season 2 has been a lot of fun for me. So all is left to say is thanks to everyone for listening, and we hope to see you for season 3.
Arrivederci. I didn't wave that time.